Welcome to this evening's meeting of the Corporate Performance and Resources Scrutiny Committee. It's Wednesday the 9th of April, and so before we get going with our agenda item today, I just want to do our usual introductions. So if everybody is sitting comfortably, I'll begin. So I just want to remind everyone present that this remote meeting is being live streamed as well as recorded via the internet. This recording will be archived then for future viewing. If a participant wishes to speak, can they please use that remote raise hand function, which is located in the bottom left-hand side of the screen. Please be patient and aware that there may be a slight time lag, and you do not need to press that button again. If having raised your hand via the remote function, you're not subsequently invited to speak, please turn your camera on or place your camera on or place a message in the chat function, When invited to speak, please could you ensure your microphones and cameras are switched on so that you can be both seen and heard. Once you've finished speaking, please remember to turn your activation button off to not delay any other participants from coming onto the screen and to avoid background noise when other participants are speaking. Please ensure that all debate is raised verbally and not via that chat function for the sake of the recording. If any participant has difficulty hearing or being heard when they are addressing the committee, then they should let myself or Democratic Services Officer know. So welcome to all of our committee members, non-committee members, officers, and any members of the public at home who are watching us or watching the live stream. Thank you. If we start with part one, which is our apologies for absence for tonight. I don't know if we've had any yet, Karen.
Councillor Hamilton, please, Chair. But I haven't heard from Councillor Lovelock-Edwards. But again, as members are aware, if Councillor Edwards is unable to let us know at the moment, within 7 days we have to do the decision notice, so she has up to 7 days to formally send apologies to me. But at the moment, I've not received hers. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm aware that she was unwell, so that might be why she's not with us. So if that's the case, I'll report her absence. Thank you, Karen. So next agenda item is our declarations of interest. I don't know if we've had any. No? Okay, that's great. So we'll move swiftly on then to agenda item 3. That's our report of the Director of Corporate Resources, and this is our only agenda item for tonight. This is our Corporate Resources Directorate plan for the next year, 25-26. And I think Tom's going to give us a quick presentation.
Thank you very much indeed, Chair. Thank you. Good evening, committee. Helen Moses and myself are going to give a quick overview presentation, if that's okay with members. And then the rest of the Corporate Resources leadership team are also online to answer any particular questions that members may have. Just wondering, Karen, are you okay to pop the slides up on the screen for us? And that's fab, thank you. So this is the Corporate Resources Directorate plan, as the Chair said, for 2025-26. It includes the actions that we'll be taking and also the measures of progress that we'll be reporting against. And the next slide just gives members a recap in terms of the new corporate plan that Council approved back last month. So structured around delivering strong communities with a bright future as the Council's vision, and 5 wellbeing objectives, which are shown on the screen here. 2 relating to place, so creating great places to live, work and visit, and respecting and celebrating the environment. 2 wellbeing objectives around people, supporting and protecting those who need us and giving everyone a good start in life, and being the best council that we can be as the 5th objective. So the next slide shows you where we are in terms of the performance framework at the moment. On the left-hand side of the screen just shows members how the corporate plan for the 5-year period translates into the work of the organisation. So later on in April, we'll be publishing an annual statement that will set out some of the highlights of activity that members and residents will see from the council in delivering Vale 2030, the corporate plan, in the coming year. There's a whole host then of integrated planning work that happens to support behind the scenes in terms of the delivery of the corporate plan. And then underneath that is the directorate plan, which is a bridge between delivering corporately and also the contributions that each of our directorates are making. So these are being brought to your committee alongside the other committees who've considered the other directorate plans over the last few weeks, members, for you to consider and then refer any comments on to Cabinet. The purpose of these from a monitoring perspective is that the actions and the measures which come out of the directorate plans will be the primary source of tracking and monitoring information that you'll have in order to show the progress and hold us to account in terms of our actions and deliverables now in the next 12 months. And all of this has an eye on the wellbeing of future generations in terms of the wellbeing goals for Wales and also the 5 ways of working that I know as members you're very familiar with. So that's the kind of background. And if we can move on to the next slide, please, Karen. Members will know that this is a new approach this year. In the past, we've had annual plans produced for each of the council's 15 or so service areas. But with a new corporate plan and following the panel performance assessment, we've taken the opportunity to look at how we do this performance management and to make some changes to hopefully simplify and reduce duplication. So those 15 plans are now replaced by 5 strategic level directorate plans. The idea and the purpose is that those plans contain higher level, more strategic actions. They highlight the risks that we're managing within the council's directorates, that they focus on the outcomes we're looking to try and deliver. And the idea is that by making these changes, we'll strengthen the alignment between the directorate self-assessments and the annual self-assessment that members will be considering later on in the summer. It helps align with the budget setting process as well, because these are being produced when we know what the budget available to us is, and also to help us then take collective action across directorates by working together rather than in separate services. So hopefully this will then enable more rounded scrutiny and reduce duplication within the departments. So that's kind of background. And then the next slide gives members just an overview of the structure to expect from the directorate plan. So it starts in terms of who we are and what we do, an overview of the directorate. It shows then the purpose of our directorate plan. So looking at, as a team, how do we contribute to the outcomes that the corporate plan Vale 2030 sets out, and obviously different directorates will be contributing to those outcomes in different combinations. There's a really important section then within the plans, members, in terms of how we manage our resources. So you'll see some information relating to our finances and savings, also the areas of engagement and risks that we're going to be managing and undertaking in the year. And then we get into the heart of the plan in section 4. That shows then for each of the corporate plan actions which are relevant to each of the directorates, some specific work that is going to be underway and associated milestones to expect from us in the coming 12 months. And then the final section, Chair and members, is around how we measure success. So within this section, you'll see the proposed measures and any targets that have been set. You'll notice as well that we've taken on board the feedback from elected members, and in particular this committee. Those are now presented in different sections, so you can see a mix of service user and citizen perspective measures, some service outcome measures, and also some measures about how we're managing the organisation. So hopefully they will give a suite of information to help give you an understanding of how we're performing. So that's the structure and the background of the plans. And then on to the next slide, if we can, please, Karen. Just to introduce corporate resources as a directorate, as members may be familiar, we have 4 service areas: digital services, legal and democratic services, financial services, and human resources and organisational development. and they're supported by 2 strategic advisory groups, one based around communications, participation, equalities and directorate development, and the second around corporate strategy and insight. And the way that the directorate works is in a matrix way, so you'll see within the plan that whilst there are lead officers against each of the actions, each of those actions will require different combinations of these services and groups to work collaboratively in order to be able to deliver against our commitments. So moving on to the next slide, please, Karen. I thought it would be useful to highlight for members the Directorate's contribution to Vale 2030, and this is just a selection, it's not a complete list, of some of the outcomes that as a Directorate we're seeking to contribute to in terms of Vale 2030. And this is where the new corporate plan is slightly different in the sense that we're talking far more about the outcomes that we want to achieve as a result of the work that we're doing within the directorates. And these are the things then that guide the actions that we will be taking in the coming years, and specifically in 2025-26, as set out within the directorate plan that you've got before you this evening. The next slide then shows you some of the information summarised from the plan in terms of our financial position. So the base budget of the Directorate is just under £16 million. Baked into that are savings of £876,000, and they're coming from a variety of schemes that are detailed within the Directorate plan, including from office accommodation, changes to the way that we manage corporate assets, and also looking at some of the income potential, for example, through increased payroll contracts, and also how we make some savings from managed headcount reductions. The plan also then sets out a significant programme of engagement and insight. As a directorate, we take the lead on some of the council-wide engagement and consultation exercises, in particular things like Let's Talk, which members will be very well aware of. Plans are to run that large-scale resident survey again this year. We'll also be leading on the budget consultation in the coming couple of months, a survey of all council staff, including our school staff, as well as undertaking specific consultation exercises to support transformation. And then in terms of key risks, this directorate takes the lead on managing quite a significant number of the corporate risks that members will be familiar with from the corporate risk register. These include financial resources, the workforce risk, digital, information and cyber security, our climate change and nature at risk, as well as the risks to physical assets. And specifically within the directorate, we've identified a number of service-specific risks relating to business continuity, to the capacity available within the directorate to deliver our plan, to supporting reshaping with sufficient pace and momentum to keep up with budget reductions, and also a risk that we don't keep pace with policy changes and our response to them. So that's the kind of background within which the directorate plan is being constructed. And the next slide then sets out how we're going to be taking some actions in order to deliver those commitments. And I'll hand over at this point to my colleague Helen, if I can, who's going to take us through the next few slides.
Thanks, Tom. So as Tom said, section 4 of the directorate plans is the actions section of the plan. And in terms of how this is set out in the plan, we've first of all shown what the commitment is to Vale 2030. So it's clear in terms of the action for the year ahead within the directorate, how that will contribute to the 5-year vision within Vale 2030. So it's setting out what we'll do. And very much as Tom was saying, a number of the actions within the Corporate Resources Directorate plan show the areas where we will be leading on behalf of the organisation, but it will bring together activities across the directorate and across the organisation itself. As we've moved away from the service annual service plans to directorate plans, it's enabled us to move towards more high-level and strategic actions. And this has partly as well been in response to feedback we've had from members and from officers in terms of the scale of actions that were generated through those service plans, and some of them being quite low level. So by moving towards the directorate plans, we've been able to take it to that more strategic level. But in recognition of that, we felt it's really important to make sure that we're building into the directorate plans the key milestones as well where relevant, so that it's clear for people to see actually what can be expected through the year in terms of the different elements of those actions as work progresses. And that will also help us with the monitoring and the progress reporting as well, together with the detailed expected outcomes within the different directorate plans as well, so that we can kind of, from the outset, we know what we'll be delivering and why and what that will be leading to. Within the plan itself as well, we then set out the lead officers and the resources to deliver them. And as Tom referenced, we've got colleagues here tonight to respond to any questions that members may have with regard to different actions. And we've also been keen as part of the collections director plans to make sure we're reflecting the key challenges and our reshaping priorities, again, across the organisation. And we undertook as part of the development of the directorate plans a moderation session, which was led by the chief executive with all directors. And this enabled the challenge in ensuring that collectively the directorate plans were providing that combined effort in terms of the delivery around Vale 2030. So that's an exercise that has been taken as well as part of this work. If I just go into a little bit more detail then on the next slide of some of the example actions within the Corporate Resources Directorate Plan, and there's 23 actions within the plan, and these are just some of the actions we wanted to highlight this evening. So we've got an action linked very much to Vale 2030 and the inclusion within the corporate plan of the statement around working with others, and that's about promoting that work in partnership and what people can expect when working with the organisation. So that's been included as an action, as well as the carbon management plan and delivery of that, which I know is something that this committee has been interested in. We've also highlighted the work around County of Sanctuary as well as work as part of the tackling poverty work, which is very prominent within the corporate plan, and within that, the working with partners to establish a multi-agency advice service. Also within the directorate plan, we've highlighted work around agreeing and implementing a customer charter across the organisation. So this is something where the lead will be taken within this directorate, but it will be working with colleagues across the organisation in terms of our work with different customers. And similarly, the work around the digital reshaping programme, which will be led by the directorate as well. That's all part of our reshaping work, and we've included within the directorate plan supporting the delivery of those key transformational projects in terms of ensuring we're making the changes that are needed. And that very much includes work that's already begun around brilliant basics. As Tom mentioned, we'll be undertaking a Let's Talk About Life in the Vale survey this year as well, so that you'll see that reference within the engagement section of the plan. And again, here is a key action. And then we've got actions around potentially changes to scrutiny in terms of supporting some of the work that's needed around that performance management and other work as well, relaunching the procurement strategy, and also work around people strategy as well. So those are just some of the elements within the directorate plan that we wanted to highlight tonight. If I can just move on to the next slide then, please, around the performance measures. So members will see that within the plan, after the action section, we detail some of the performance measures that we'll be looking at through the year. So within these, we've continued with some of our existing measures, as well as developing some new measures. Where measures are being carried forward, we've be looking to set targets this year where possible, based on information to hand. And as Tom mentioned, we've set out the performance measures within the plan under a number of themes here. So you'll see that under citizen perspective, we've included a number of data sets that link to the Let's Talk survey, for example, including resident satisfaction with the Vale as a place to live. Under service user perspective, we'll be looking at customer satisfaction with interaction with the contact centre, as well as other measures. Performance against saving targets under finance, and an example of one of our measures under people is spend on agency staff. Within property and decarbonisation, we'll be looking at our reduction in our carbon footprint. So that links very much to our work around Project Zero and the carbon management plan. And then within digital efficiencies that will be identified through digitalisation, which again cuts across a number of activities. Where we have population measures, which are linked back to some of the data that we've included within Vale 2030, it's not possible for us to set measures for those, but we will be looking at the data, and as part of our performance reporting, setting out some of the trends around that as well. So that's the final slide in terms of the just going through some of the content within the directorate plan itself for corporate resources, as well as giving an overview about the work that's been undertaken as the organisation has moved to this from annual plan service plans to directorate plans to support the work of Vale 2030. So thank you. That's the end of the presentation. Thanks.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Helen. Before we get to members' questions, I just want to make clear how grateful we are as a committee for the amount of work that's gone into this plan, for the amount of consultation and engagement as well that's helped to produce it and refine it. I think we can all feel on reflection that this is an improved version on former versions. So we are definitely heading in the right direction. And I just wanted to make that clear. We're really grateful for the work that's gone into this. I can see Councillor Franks is going to start off the debate. He's got his hand up. So can I bring in Councillor Franks? Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you for that concise presentation. Very interesting. I've got 3 points I'd like to initially raise, Chair. And hopefully, I hope, I've got the reference. I wish to discuss our future plans regarding food strategy. It's one of the bullet points at the start of the appendix, and it's CP/20. And then integrated programme to prevent poverty, which is CP37, and I think it's on page 20. And then, unhelpfully, I didn't have a reference regarding the bullet point of encouraging volunteers. So to go back to food strategy, that's great, very good, but that's an enormous issue to deal with, and I just wonder how we, as a local authority, can engage with that point. The second one is integrated programme to prevent poverty. Well, there are so many things outside our control. For instance, the Westminster government's cut of the winter fuel allowance, for instance. How can we address that? And the current proposals to reduce availability of PIP allowances. In what way can we overcome that, as well as all the other concerns? And I'm very keen that we do encourage more volunteers. I've never, I'll be honest, I don't wish to be unkind, but I've never noticed that the Vale has been very successful in directing volunteers to local charities and community groups. They basically they've got to go out and find the volunteers on their own. So I'd be interested to hear what the officers are saying on those 3 points. But also, I know my friend Gwyn John, cabinet member, is here, but I'm looking to see if the leader or the deputy leader is in the room, and it would be good if they could make a comment. Thank you.
Chair, you're on silent. You're on mute.
Thank you, Karen. Sorry, first error of today. Thanks, Councillor Franks. I was just saying that, yeah, totally agree with you. The food strategy and food resilience is so important. So I've also got questions on that one. What we can do to reduce poverty, absolutely. And then the third question on volunteers. Yesterday, there was a really good presentation on what we're doing to solve this, well, not solve the issue, to support volunteers. So I know that there's something that Tom's going to share with us now, but yeah, Over to you, Tom.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Councillor Franks, for the questions. I'll pick up on the first couple, and I may bring Helen in on volunteers if I may. In terms of the question around the food strategy, absolutely, you're right that it's a very wide-ranging piece of work. I'm grateful to colleagues from the public health team in Cardiff and Vale UHB who are leading on the Vale Food Partnership, of which the council is a significant contributor. We've been contributing to the development of the partnership's food strategy over the last year or so. In particular, probably from two angles. Initially from food production perspective. So our food and farming officer from the Police Directorate has been working very closely within that strategy to make sure that the strategy works as a direction setting for those who are producing food within the Vale. And then from our perspective, we've very much been contributing to the work and working in partnership with that team around providing support to access good quality, affordable food. I know we've brought a report to members in the last 6 months in terms of the work that we do to tackle poverty and the cost of living crisis. And as part of that, we've been mentioning the use of grant funding as well as the Council's reserve to support a range of different schemes, including accessing food insecurity. So the work that this directorate is specifically going to be doing is working with that partnership to make sure that they are able to get approval for the strategy, part of the PSB's work, and then to make sure that when we're getting grant funding from Welsh Government and others, although predominantly Welsh Government, we're able to then make most effective use of that to support people who are potentially most in need. And that links with your second point, Councillor Franks, in terms of that integrated programme of work to tackle poverty. Since the cost of living crisis just after COVID, we've been bringing together the activities of a variety of different colleagues across the organisation with a focus on tackling cost of living and indeed the longer term, more systemic issues around poverty. And that work has now morphed into the Public Services Board's project, which is focused in our 3 most deprived areas within the Vale. All 3 of those are within Barry. We're working with the PSB to undertake a wide-ranging engagement exercise. We've been meeting with partners to look at the findings from that engagement, but also the data that we have available. And most recently, we've run a couple of workshops based around the theme of health and income. What that's doing is allowing us then to put together some actions that we can take in partnership with a focus on supporting those communities. So that's the very focused work in terms of the integration of work on poverty. And then the slightly broader piece of work, which is referenced within the Directorate Plan, is about bringing together colleagues from across the organisation to further look at the opportunities that we have to support people. And that, from our team's perspective, looks at things like making sure people are aware of the entitlements that are available to them, making sure that we're joining up our services to make them as accessible and connected as possible, telling us their story once and us acting on that information cohesively. And also we've got a meeting in the diary in the next few weeks with colleagues from Citizens Advice to look at how do we join up services with their organisations, such as money advice, benefits, housing, and local area energy support. So that's the kind of work that we're anticipating in the next 12 months. I hope that helps. And I'll hand over to Helen just to touch briefly on the volunteering point, if I may.
Thanks, Tom. So with regard to the query with volunteers, there's a number of actions across the Directorate Plan which will be working more closely with the third sector, and particularly of the work I referred to earlier around the partnership statement and how we work with community organisations and third sector organisations in terms of that work and what they can expect from us in terms of that that support, where there's funding opportunities available, that we'll look to make sure that there's good notice of that and not onerous sort of monitoring arrangements around some of that work. We work closely with GVS as well in terms of trying to promote volunteering opportunities and signposting opportunities as well. And within the housing team, they also run a Value in the Vale project as well, which is about encouraging volunteers and supporting people into volunteering through that way. So there's a number of different initiatives across the organisation, and I think through the different elements of the work that we've got here, we'd be looking to strengthen that work. I'm not sure with regard to your comment, Councillor Franks, whether it was in relation to some of the discussion and the reference from Environment and Regeneration Scrutiny Committee last night, because there was a discussion there, I understand, around some of the work within some of the directorate plans there and the work with regards to volunteers. And again, I think what we'll be looking at is across the organisation, what the support can be around that, both the communications element and the encouragement. So I think it will be something we'd look to see moving forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Helen. Councillor Franks, do you want to come back in on
yes,
any points?
Thank you, colleagues. I wasn't referring to last night's meeting, so I'm going to have to gen up on that. But I would say that GVS is very good at supporting existing charities, and they have the annual Volunteers Fair. But I'll be honest with you, I've never been aware of a great number of volunteers coming from that event, and I have to repeat that my experience is in the voluntary sector, the charity sector, they've got to find their own additional volunteers. And regarding the food, my concern is that many areas, especially poorer areas, don't have, say, a good choice for fresh fruit and veg. My community does, but many communities don't have that that benefit. And Food Bank, for instance, I think find it very difficult to provide fresh food because of a whole range of rules and regulations. So even that avenue is a bit of a blank. But there you are. I've made my point, and I thank the officers and you, Chair, for giving me a chance to have my say. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Franks. Matt, you're not on the screen, but there you are. Did you want to come in on anything then?
Yeah, I just wanted to come in on the comments here of Councillor Franks around the winter fuel allowance, and just to let colleagues know, at that time our benefits team were really proactive in supporting the local population. So we had a targeted mail shot out to all of those people that we were aware could potentially be in receipt of pension credit. So there were some challenges because of data protection and not being able to use some of the DWP data that we had access to target those people. But we have attempted to give as much support as possible during that time. Okay.
Thank you, Matt. We've got Councillor John. Now he's our cabinet member who's here tonight. Would you like to contribute on any of those comments from Councillor Franks?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah,
thank you.
In reply to Councillor Franks, I'd like to mention the volunteering side. Yes, I think it's really each area of the Vale, and probably if they got together, would have a huge number of volunteers. In Landford Major, where I can speak on, there's a lot of clubs with a lot of volunteering groups, but also when you come down to Landford Major next, I'll take you along to CF61, where the gardens at CF61, that was all done by volunteer groups. And it's quite amazing the amount of work they've done there and continue to work there. There are a lot of, for example, the local clubs, the local junior football team, they were falling away at one stage, but the number of volunteers that have come forward to keep it running. There's people that go around doing elderly people's gardens. There's a lot of people out there that don't like to see their name up in lights as a volunteer, but they do their own little volunteering and go along to help people. And it's quite surprising, Chris, the number of people that are out there today. Also, CF61 on a Thursday got the food share. And that's done an enormous, as Tom will enlarge on that, I'm sure. And quite simply, there are a lot of work being done that goes unnoticed. And I welcome you to come into Lantford any time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor John. And I echo what you say too. In the rural Vale, our volunteers literally are the backbone of the community, and they do so much. Forgive me, Councillor Franks, because I was on the committee scrutiny last night, so I was part of that discussion on volunteers, and the committee, which I'm sure we endorse, talked about how important we felt volunteers were and will be more so going forward, and that we would want our volunteers to be supported and to feel that they're supported, and for whatever we can do as a council to not just encourage but to support, but to champion what they do for all of us as well. So that was the conversation that we were having, and that was part of the recommendation. And I know that there are plans afoot, so that's really, really good. I think with the food strategy and in the rural Vale, just like in Lantwit, we've kind of taken matters into our own hands, and we have a food share where primarily we're promoting locally grown organic veg, because just as you've said, it is the ultra processed food which contains very little nutrients, which is the cheap food, and the locally grown, and dare I say the word organic, but that's the very expensive food. So we're trying to get equality, we're trying to get healthier food onto the table, and we rely on volunteers just like everybody else in this world. I think though, going back to the food strategy and the comments from Councillor Franks, I'm wondering, seeing as I know there is so much that we are doing in the Vale with our food sustainability group, with Food Sense Wales, with the Veg in Schools project, with the education piece, with Caddiston and Oakfield Primary. There's an awful lot of work streams here. But I'm wondering, because it's such an important and such a big piece of work, we haven't talked about targets with this, but I'm wondering if maybe we could think about having some targets associated with increasing locally grown and the volume and percentage of locally grown and produced food that we actually have through our wholesale contracts for school with the Big Fresh. I'm wondering if there could possibly be a target to show how we are supporting local growers and local manufacturers, just something to consider, so that we've got that focus. And I know that your local farm officer is doing wonderful work too, but we need to shout about it more, I think. Councillor Carroll, I can see you have your hand up. Do you want to come in on any of these points?
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you, everybody, for the presentation. I'm going to keep my comments focused on the Directorate Action Plan, if that makes sense, because obviously that's the part of this that's going to be most immediate to us and going to see the most progress. First of all, I wanted to ask about CP41, and in particular the idea about embedding culture change within the organisation. Could you provide some more information on that, please, regarding what it entails?
There you are. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you, Councillor Carroll. Sorry, I was scribbling down and trying to press the activation button. Let me just get to CP41. So this one is around how we're, as an organisation, transforming in order to better meet the needs of our residents over the medium term. And as members will be aware, the reshaping programme has got a variety of different themes, meaning that we're going to be transforming how individual services are going to be operating, looking at how the council takes decisions and operates within the leadership team, our procurement practices, the way that we engage with our colleagues, as well as embracing new digital technology, strengthening communities work, but also the work of economic resilience, so all of that investment that comes in. And the reason for giving that kind of context, Councillor Carroll, is that there's going to be significant period of change in the next 5 years as the council adapts to those new demands and that new financial reality. And alongside that, we are committed to supporting our colleagues in order to understand the contribution that they're making and the importance of the priorities that, as an organisation, we're setting. So within CP41, we talk about the work programme for reshaping. Members will have seen some of that within the budget proposals for 25-26 that went to council recently. But also then looking at how do we develop the skills that we need within the organisation to deliver those commitments. Some of that is wide-ranging skills. So, for example, we've spoken in the past at this committee around the Brilliant Basics way of working. So that's the commitment to making sure that we get the basics right every time for our customers. That means that we need to support and understand for our colleagues how they go about delivering that. There's also then going to be some new skills and ways of adapting in order that we can ensure that people are able to work in new ways, for example, making use of different technology, working in different locations. So the work that goes alongside that is about ensuring that we've got the right culture based around, the organisation's values, so that people are able to respond and adapt and continue to perform as well as we need them to.
May I come back in, please, Chair?
Absolutely. Please go ahead.
So I note your points there, Tom, about changing to adapt new circumstances. I didn't really pick so much up about things that you don't think have been done so well over the past 5 or so years. What would you say the main areas for improvement would be? And how would changing the culture help address them?
Okay. I would point to the council's annual self-assessment process, which we run and we have run for the last couple of years, and we bring through this committee and other committees, and that picks up on a range of different things where we want to continuously improve. This is the point of performance management, isn't it? Is the fact that there are always things that we will want to do more of and we will want to do better of. I think the things that we're focusing in on in terms of Brilliant Basics is a good example of responding to a whole section of those kinds of things. So, for example, that Brilliant Basics Charter, which is being developed by our staff for our staff, talks about making best use of the systems and processes that we've got available, being as responsive as we possibly can be to our customers, ensuring we're delivering as much value for money as we possibly can at all times. And that's not to say that those things have not been done in the past. What it is to say is that they're things that we're committed to wanting to do even better in the future. And the cultural change piece, I think, just is used in order to show our staff that we are supporting them and that we're developing those things as the world is changing. So that's the point of having that kind of cultural change and people strategy that members will see now in the coming months as that work is progressed.
So you made I may come back in again, Chair, if that's okay. You've made a strategic decision to move away from monitoring these things at a service level. How do you envisage that improving performance?
Yeah, absolutely. And what we are moving away from, Councillor Carroll, is, as you say, is having 15 service plans. That's not to say that we're not going to be monitoring individual staff contribution to these things. So one of the subjects of conversation that we had with all of our chief officers a couple of weeks ago was the absolute importance of ensuring that whilst we have 5 directorate plans, they are higher level, more strategic documents than they have been in the past. It means that there's less noise in the system when we're coming to managing and reporting performance to yourselves. And we've had conversations over the years about the volume versus the quality, and these are this is in direct response to that, in trying to simplify and reduce that duplication. But in doing that, that doesn't mean that individual members of staff won't see their contributions. So, for example, we are not formally requiring heads of service to have service plans. We're not, as we haven't done for a number of years, requiring managers to produce individual team plans, but we're not preventing them from doing so either. And I know indeed a number of teams and services are planning to have those plans in place because they find that a useful part of the overall framework, because what they're saying is that it makes it useful for them to show the contributions of their individual members of staff. But what is required of all managers is to make sure that there is an annual appraisal in place for each member of staff. And that appraisal sets objectives which shows their contribution up to the corporate plan and to delivering on these outcomes. So, for example, in my area, all of my staff will have an opportunity to meet with their line manager to set their objectives based on the contribution to the directorate plan. So there is still going to be that very clear connection between what we're doing as individuals and what we're trying to deliver as an organisation.
And if I may come back in one final time, Chair, the one thing I think that may be lacking from this Directorate Action Plan, from what I can see, is that corporate performance and resources is obviously the lead scrutiny committee, and as a directorate, everything else flows from it, i.e. it decides, from finance, for example, decides how budgets are allocated. I think it would be helpful if there was something more service specific within this action plan. And the reason I say that is because I see reference to services. It's not as though they're not referred to, but this authority exists as a service provider. That's its primary aim. And reading through some of the action plans, I think by moving away from being service specific, I think that the way resources are allocated within the authority should be a greater priority within this plan. I mean, we talked on the budget about the key areas that are causing cost pressures for the authority. We talked about things like teachers' pay. We talked about school transport. Children and social services came up at the last meeting of this committee, for example. And I think that there needs to be some broader oversight of those matters. I appreciate that they are the responsibilities of other directorates, but if they need more resource to cope with these pressures, then obviously it's something that will fall to this directorate to make happen. So I'd be grateful for some steer on what's going to be done to ensure there's adequate oversight of that and that appropriate action will be taken to ensure that those areas that are under pressure get the support that they need. Because I think that it may need to be the case that this authority, notwithstanding grant funding it may get from Welsh Government, will need to look at reallocating resources from elsewhere to ensure that those core services get the cash they need to keep providing their services. And I'd be grateful for some steer on how that's going to happen.
So, certainly, Councillor Carroll, and if I may, I'll start and I'll bring my colleague Matt in. And I think your point is right. In terms of, obviously, we provide support services across the organisation. We obviously have the finance function within the directorate. I think it's fair to say that the strategic leadership team work collaboratively and have collective responsibility for the council's budget, but the actual administration of that is obviously done, as you say, within the directorate. I wonder if there's an opportunity perhaps to reflect some of what you were just describing within the CP41, but within the action around supporting the delivery of key transformational projects as set out within the reshaping prospectus. I wonder if there is something in there about just strengthening a reference to this directorate working to support the production of a balanced budget in the medium term, including the allocation of resources, so that that's something that is very specifically referenced within the action. And then in terms of the monitoring, this committee will obviously continue to receive quarterly financial monitoring reports, which will cover the breadth of the organisation, and that's maybe the opportunity to connect the two things. So if yourself and committee were minded, perhaps we could look at the wording in that action to make it a bit more explicit. But Matt might have some additional contribution if I may bring him in.
Thank you, Councillor Carroll. Thank you, Tom. So we'll look at asking then for CP41 to have that specific connection with the committee, and as Councillor Carroll said, we're still going to be getting these quarterly reports, so we will be, monitoring the ongoing progress anyway. Matt, you've come in, so please, I'm sure you want to add to this.
A few to add to what Tom said, but just to highlight some of the work that already goes on, some of it behind the scenes and some of it more visibly, but allocation of resources, especially when you haven't got enough, is a really tough job, and we try to do that as an informed manner as possible. The budget work we've done this year has been underpinned by some quite comprehensive benchmarking work. We take soundings through Society of Welsh Treasurers to understand pressures other councils are facing. And we also do detailed work through the budget working groups, not just looking at the cost pressures and savings, but actually looking at what the overall service delivery and costs of services are. So there's a lot going on behind the scenes in what is a really thorough budget setting process. But I'm certainly supportive of what Tom's just said and put a bit more coverage of that in the plan.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Councillor Carroll. Councillor Goodjohn, would you like to come in now? Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. If I may, I'm going to ask 3 questions and let officers respond one at a time, because I expect there'll be different officers wanting to respond to different things. So first off, can I ask about child poverty within the plan? And this covers all directorates, and as the lead committee, I thought it was best to ask here. I think there's a complete lack within our performance indicators of measuring the way that we're addressing child poverty as a core part of the corporate plan. So my main question is, how are we measuring a reduction in child poverty, and if we're contributing towards that?
Thank you, Councillor Goodjohn. Is this one for you, Tom? Yes?
Thank you very much indeed. Sorry, Councillor, I was just scrolling to part of the corporate plan which relates to tackling poverty, and members will note that within Vale 2030 we've introduced a section, is section number 5, which is around action to prevent and tackle poverty, and what that does is bring together the range of different actions which are throughout the 5 wellbeing objectives, and shows how they're going to contribute against a range of different themes, including housing, employment, access to services. Has some specific commitments around children, families, social services within those, and looking at the outcomes that we're looking to achieve. The targets that, the measures against those are set out within each of the wellbeing objectives. So you can see, for example, in the section relating to providing support and protecting those who need us, that we're looking at fewer people living with homelessness, that we're looking at ensuring that people have got access to good quality, healthy food every day, and ensuring that there's a safe reduction in the number of children who need to be in care and children who are in care as specific aspects of our work. So they're the ambitions that we want to see. And then there are a series of outline measures within the plan. Some of those include the number of children who are being looked after, the number who are in, the number of households that are in relative poverty. So there are aspects throughout the plan in terms of the measures. I don't know whether, Councillor Goodjohn, it might be useful for us to consider extracting the measures from across the Directorate plans to supplement the reporting that we do on a 6-monthly basis when we're reporting against tackling poverty. We do currently do that based on the old framework of performance measures, and perhaps that would be a useful thing for us to continue to do so that members could see that basket of measures together.
Yeah, I think that would be extremely helpful, because if we're not considering that as part of our key performance indicators, that would be an abject failure. But if you're measuring it already, you're aware of which measures you're going to use. I would specify as well that we make sure we have some measures on child poverty, because that is one of our key actions within the corporate plan as well as the overarching theme, as you're right to say, on poverty overall. Okay, as my second main question, if I can bring it up again, at the last service plan and annual delivery plan, we included as many of the key performance indicators on decarbonisation, a raft of different measures on how our carbon emissions were changing in different parts of the council. Now, in this Directorate plan, we seem to only have one measure, which is non-domicile buildings, when we're talking about decarbonisation. So I wonder what the decision, what the thought process was behind removing those particular performance indicators, which could be quite helpful when measuring our performance against Project Zero. Anyone's welcome to give it a go. Tom again.
I'll start, Councillor Goodjohn, and Matt or Helen may wish to come in. I think the balance we've tried to strike with the Directorate plan is not to necessarily duplicate or replicate lots of measures that might exist in other plans and that would be reported in different forums. So you are right that we are looking at pulling out a specific commitment from the carbon management plan around reduction in the footprint of our non-domestic property. We're also looking at measures around the way that our organisation works in terms of digital and the impact that has in terms of decarbonisation. And they're the measures which are within the framework. That's not to say, though, Councillor Goodjohn, at all, that all of those measures which are within the carbon management plan and the actions which are tracked within the Project Zero Challenge plan won't still continue to be monitored and reported as part of the cyclical updates on those matters. So members will still have access to that information, including full access to the council's carbon emissions reporting that goes into Welsh Government and we get in September, October of each year. So if there are perhaps some specific examples of things that the committee feel might be useful for us to consider putting in specific measures within the performance framework, of course, we could take a look, but just wanted to give some reassurance that all of that will still exist and be provided in other formats as well.
Thanks, Tom. I think my main comment on that point would be this is different, you're right, to the poverty measures, which I asked about before, because the poverty measures aren't really being considered in one main forum anywhere else. So having that as part of the performance, as it's a key part of the corporate plan, I think is very important. Here, you're right, it's different if it's being considered elsewhere, but it needs to make sure that it is being considered elsewhere. So Project Zero Board, you're absolutely right, but also in the public domain, if that's environment and regeneration, whatever that might be, it's very important that as long as it's being considered somewhere against the corporate plan, that's very important. My last main one, if I may, is about working with the third sector. Action 1 seemed generally positive regarding the working with others statement and engaging more in forums that already exist in internal networks. My question would be, generally we've seen poor confidence in the third sector. I'm thinking about the joint committee overall when it comes to the existing networks with the council, in particularly in certain third sector areas of the Vale and parts of the third sector. So I wonder if you consider the existing networks to be enough, and is there any kind of step towards more proactive working collaboratively with third sector organisations, particularly those that are in GVS, to try and reach out a bit more to these organisations instead of hiding behind the formal networks that already exist?
Thank you, Councillor Goodjohn, and absolutely, I think the action we've got within the Directorate Plan is really important in terms of making sure that we communicate really stridently that those commitments to working in partnership that is contained within Vale 2030, and that's the reason for wanting to do that piece of work. In terms of the issues that you raise in terms of those other existing networks, so things like the Voluntary Sector Joint Liaison Committee, for example, how do we make effective use of those things? I think it probably is time to review those arrangements. We have a very close and good working professional relationship with GVS. I meet with the Chief Exec every month to discuss the issues that are of mutual concern and opportunities to work closely together. I think through things like the Equalities Consultative Forum, we've seen the ability for third sector organisations to have their voices heard and to influence and share their views, which then have helped shape our policies. But again, there are some commitments within our plan this year to look at revitalising those arrangements and looking at doing things in different ways. And of course, we also have the elected member champions who represent quite often issues which are championed by the third sector. So there's an opportunity there. So the answer to the question is, are the existing networks enough? No, we've got a theme in the transformation programme of reshaping services around strengthening communities. The third sector is a massive part of that, and we want to do more. And is there an opportunity to do things in a more proactive way? Yes, I think so. And I think you'll see as part of the milestones that we've got in the action plan for this year that we're hoping to make progress on being able to do that as well. I don't know if Matt wanted to also supplement that on third sector working.
Hi, I was just going to come in on the second of Councillor Goodjohn's questions around and just fill in a bit more about your response, Tom, on the carbon management plan. So just to say that a really extensive piece of work, and we've been reporting that to Project Zero Board on a regular basis and having a deep dive into each of the sections, having a look at waste, buildings, fleet, and that's the internal look at it. But we will be reporting on progress around that plan on an annual basis back to Cabinet and Scrutiny.
Great. Chair, can I make some final comments? Is that all right?
Yes,
no more questions.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, just to help democratic services as well, my main things would be trying to embed some more performance indicators on poverty, and particularly child poverty as well, because there's nowhere else it's being scrutinised publicly, unlike decarbonisation. I would ask for a key milestone regarding proactive work with the third sector, because at the moment that doesn't seem to be part of the document as a whole. My final main point would be, and there's no answer to this necessarily, but I would like to see as part of the resources required part of directorate plans going forward. I'd love to see some more information basically saying about the cost pressures awarded and savings needing to be achieved, which is higher up in the document, being kind of incorporated more as part of the actions. So if there's money being awarded for a cost pressure that has to do with a certain action being taken, I would love to see that as part of, very briefly, I don't want to extend the document anymore, but I would say that is the place for that to go, because at the moment it's kind of missing. So that would be very helpful. And my other point would be that I don't think it's healthy for us to think that every single action should be and must be and can be achieved with just existing resources and possibly grant funding. It's important that we acknowledge that sometimes if we're going to put enough resource into specific action, that can divert away from other things that we could be doing, and we need to be honest about that, or that's going to cost additional funds that either has already been considered as part of the budget or needs to be considered as part of future monitoring of the budget situation. So that would be my last comment. I hope that helps Democratic as well as officers. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Goodjohn. Councillor Johnson, please come in.
Good day, Ruth. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Tom and Helen, for the presentation earlier this evening. I'm not entirely sure how I feel about the document here, and that's for several reasons. So I'd like to make some quick comments on this. For one thing, I think there's a tension between the role of this committee as an overview committee at the council and the fact that we are looking in great detail at the plan for corporate governance. And that's a small percentage of the money spent by the council during the course of the year. So that's one thing, just the tension between those 2 points, and how also we can look at how the council works corporately as a council, to all intents and purposes. Then in terms of the plan itself, it feels to me as if most of these actions, to all intents and purposes, are part of other plans. So in order to understand what exactly the implications of taking action is, then I have to go and look at what we've said in the asset management plan, for example, or what we state in a plan for something else. So that's happened several times in this instance. So it's quite high level in terms of the expectation. So it's a list of actions that the council will undertake during the coming year, but those things may be included in another document. So it helps me to understand what the director's trying to do, but I'm not entirely clear what the aim of this is before I look in more detail or in great detail. Also, I have some concerns about the performance monitoring here. And this is in two ways. Firstly is the sense check in terms of some of the expectations, what they would call here the citizen's perspective. So there are questions, for example, about whether people agree that the council is doing enough in terms of the climate emergency or the nature emergency. It's possible to say that the council never does enough. So, yes, that it does need to be a little bit of a sense check, I think, with some of the statements made and how we are going to analyse. Similarly, much of the document also feels like a little bit of a clean slate. And there are a number of the performance monitoring measures, including baselines still to be determined. So because this makes a number of those statements, then this causes me some concern because, when exactly will we know what will be happening and if this is the best way of looking at the progress. So I have some concerns in terms of how this is going to work as a new way of reporting and reporting back. Clearly, as Tom's already said, the self-assessment, of course, is a way of looking in more detail at this, but I still have some concerns on this. 2 points then, just to conclude. One is, as someone who represents one of the LSOAs with highest deprivation and poverty in the county, I welcome that work, but poverty exists across the whole county and not only in those small areas. So we have to make sure that the work is targeted in those 3 areas, but also for anyone who needs it across the county. And just another question then about the emissions and the targets here. One of the problems we've had by now with calculating emissions is the methodology around that. So I would like some kind of assurance from officers tonight that problems with that methodology around emissions the problems have been resolved, so that we can be happy that the figures are going to be accurate and not associated with the expenditure, which is the problem we've had in the past. So the kind of expenditure we make is equating to the emissions. So if we're increasing the expenditure on something, then we may be actually increasing emissions. To make sure we don't increase those emissions. So just wanted to make those points, and I'd welcome your comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson. And perhaps if I try and answer most of those, and I'll see how well I'm doing by whether my colleagues start to put their hands up to add to it, if that's okay. I think you're right in terms of the dual role for this committee, in terms of that oversight. Clearly, corporate resources as a directorate sits within specifically within the remit of the committee, and that's the reason for bringing the plan in detail to you. And it's also the reason then for you having the opportunity to consider the references from the other committees later on your agenda to have that kind of oversight. So in effect, those committees should have reviewed those plans and given their thoughts to yourselves as the corporate performance committee. But I take the point in you have one in lots and lots of detail, but you have oversight over all of them. The observation around several of the actions talk about the delivery of other plans, and I take that on board. I think the rationale for doing that has been so that we don't end up with so many actions within the framework that you almost can't see the wood for the trees. So we've tried to make sure that, for example, within Project Zero or the carbon management plan are probably good examples of this. There are reporting frameworks for those pieces of work. They go to committees so that there's an opportunity for elected members to see in detail the progress of those. They're fundamental pieces of work that we want to do to deliver towards the corporate plan. but our performance framework probably doesn't need to include every aspect of them, but it needs to provide an opportunity to summarise progress for elected members. And that's the reason for wanting to put those kind of actions in, so that you'd get a high-level update as part of your 6-monthly performance monitoring, but then signposted to the more detail elsewhere within committee papers. So, but it's something for us to give some thought to, certainly as we reflect on changes potentially to scrutiny.
Just in for that.
Just one point there, Tom. Is it possible to provide a link in these documents so it makes it easier for me to scroll directly from the directorate plan over to the specific plans? Would it be possible to put a link in the document to go and see exactly what those action points are, please?
We can certainly look to do that, Councillor Johnson. Apologies, I had an echo on this end. We can certainly have a look at where it's possible to do that, to make those connections as clear as possible. I think that's a good suggestion, and certainly we can have a look at it. In terms of the concerns around performance monitoring around the carbon emissions, that framework has been being developed by Welsh Government. So you're right that sometimes there have been some anomalies. We've been pointing those anomalies out to Welsh Government, and they continue year on year to make refinements to that methodology. And I would hope that will continue. You are absolutely right as well in terms of the importance of seeing poverty as an issue, that we are doing some concentrated effort and working within those 3 LSOAs in Barry. But it's the reason why I was very keen that there are 2 actions within the plan, one specifically relating to those very small geographical areas but have much higher or more acute levels of poverty, but also that more general piece of work that as a director we want to do in bringing that more multi-agency response that would be a more universal approach, if you like, to reaching as many people who are experiencing poverty but might not live in those areas. And then finally, in terms of the sort of clean slate, I know when we refresh the corporate plan, we look for new performance measures. It means that we get a higher number of measures where, for the first year, we are establishing a baseline to understand where the target can be set. We try where we can to balance out on those with things where we are able to at least be reporting progress in terms of those measures within the year, though, as well. So we try and, where we can, limit the number of annual measures so that at least members are getting some information at month 6 in particular. But I do acknowledge the point that the first year of a new corporate plan with these kind of changes in the framework does mean that we end up with a number where we're having to establish baselines on. But Helen might want to come in on that point, if that's okay with yourself.
Thanks, Tom. And just, I suppose, to pick up on a couple of points. With regard to the query about links to other plans, what we've done as part of the publication of the corporate plan is we've created a page where you can link into many of the plans referenced within Vale 2030, which will be a number of the same plans that are linked into the directorate plan. So we can now include that link, I think, in the directorate plan. So that would be an easy reference point. So we can certainly act upon that. In terms of the points about the reporting of carbon emissions, as Tom said, it's something that we're continuing to enhance and improve, and working with the guidance from Welsh Government. Part of the work that the Project Zero Board has been doing late, and that Matt referenced earlier, is doing some of that deep dive to understand some of those changes within the emissions and why the emissions as they are, so that we're looking at them in more detail, what they mean and how we can use that information to inform the work moving forward. So I think that's why within the directorate plan itself, we've picked up that issue around making those links between the carbon management plan and the Project Zero work, and how we undertake that work, but also in terms of enhancing the reporting as well, so we can kind of go behind some of that data as well and explain what some of that might mean. So I think, as you say, it's work that's certainly improved over time, but we want to continue to refine on our understanding of that. And then just finally, with regard to targets, there are a number of measures where we haven't set a target, where it's an existing measure and we're just waiting for the end of year performance. So we're trying to get the directorate plan ready for the beginning of the financial year, but obviously we're still waiting for the end of year performance to be gathered now. So there are some that will have some targets that will be set that will then be included within the performance reporting through the year. So some will have to wait for a year because they're new, but there are a few that we will be able to set some targets for now once we've got that end of year information as well. So hopefully that clarifies a couple of those points. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Johnson, Helen and Tom. Councillor Wood, please come in.
Hi, good evening, Chair. I'd like to echo quite a lot of what Councillor Johnson just said. I appreciate that this is a very high-level document, and this is represents a change in the way that the council wants to work. But whilst we all want to have concise presentations and a certain amount of brevity in what we absorb, when I look at, for example, supporting and protecting those who need us, that might be, these 3 points here might be what we are attempting to do this year. But the reality is that that column could go on for 50 points. And there are myriad people who need us. And to drill it down to 3 just leaves me a little bit concerned that the detail of how we are performing to support those who need us may well get lost and not reported back to us in an adequate manner. Whilst, of course, it's great that we create a great place to live and we attempt to do net zero or succeed, and give people, we have myriad reasons why people need us. And I'm just a little scared that it's been drilled down to 3 points, admirable as they may be. And on another issue, and maybe these aren't questions, but this is more of a statement, waiting for people to tell us that we've done a great job may well be quite fruitless. I have a feeling that we should probably be trying to reduce the amount of complaints that do come through. And if we have 0 complaints, I think we might be able to assume we've done a good job. Sorry, it's more of a statement than a question, but I look forward to seeing the detailed outcomes of this new way of trying to provide scrutiny, because I appreciate this is very high level, but at the end of the day, I don't want the detail of the corporate performance of the council to be lost. And thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wood. And you are right that it's a new approach, and it is a higher level approach, more strategic in terms of the actions. And what we're trying to do is reduce the number of individual actions from 400 odd down to a couple of hundred across the organisation. Just though wanted to give some reassurance in terms of the 3 points or the 3 actions that this directorate are going to be undertaking in terms of contributing to supporting and protecting those who need us. That's only the Corporate Resources Directorate's contribution. So other parts of the organisation will also be undertaking work to contribute towards that objective. And in particular, I know that we've got a significant contribution there from social services, but also elements of education, and also the Housing and Environment Directorate have got actions that contribute to those. So this is just my plan, if you like, for the Directorate and our colleagues. Nikki is going to come in terms of complaints and satisfaction. You are absolutely right. We do have a measure within the framework looking at how satisfied people are in terms of our management of their complaints. And again, that's not a bad example of where there is an existing detailed report that is published on an annual basis showing our complaints performance and what we're trying to do to improve it. And as colleagues will know, that goes to the Governance and Audit Committee and on to Cabinet. But if I may, I'll bring Nikki in to add to that point.
Hi. So as Tom mentioned, complaints sit with us, and it's important to note that obviously as we are dealing with a number of very challenging situations, we obviously want to be able to deliver the service that all of our residents require. But there are occasions where we're not able to do that, either because of a regulatory requirement or a similar situation. So we aren't always going to be able to say yes, unfortunately, and therefore the important element is that we handle that complaint correctly. We respond in a positive way, identify those opportunities for change and improvement, and that we reflect those in our response. And then secondly, in terms of satisfaction around the contact with the contact centre, it's quite a challenging situation in that although we ask for a reflection on their experience with the contact centre, that may actually reflect another element of the service provision. And again, we're not always able to give everybody exactly what they want. We'd like to, but it's not feasible as a council. Expectations are changing, and sometimes we're not always able to perfectly meet it. But our objective there is to ensure that the satisfaction with the contact centre experience and how we handle that is the best that we possibly can.
Thank you, Tom. Thank you, Nikki. Nikki, can I just ask you quickly, because obviously part of the digital transformation is how we do things differently and use technology to do that. And I know Councillor Carroll's asked this question before, but is RPA, robotic process automation, one of the things that we're looking at?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's a significant amount of opportunity with robotic process automation, where what we want to do is ensure that the teams that we have are as human as possible, and that means removing the drudgery, and that's where RPA absolutely comes in. So there's a combination of RPA, linking systems better. So RPA works really well in some places. Actually, a more robust situation is often APIs, and then also we're also looking cautiously at where AI can append our humanity and reduce some of that administrative work.
Absolutely, you can't replace humans in certain situations, and that's for sure. I mean, we're interested as a committee, so I mean, if we are progressing certain things and we're looking at certain areas, it'd be really, really lovely to have you back with the report on how things are going, if that's possible in the future.
Yeah. Absolutely, and RPA and that automation piece is a significant opportunity in front of us, and we've got quite ambitious plans there. So yeah, we'll certainly bring a report back.
Wonderful, that's exciting. I've got one more question, and I know we've had quite a long debate, but it was just to do with CPM 009. I'm just asking for clarity. So it's finance and procurement savings target. Are we going to have a savings target attributed to procurement tenders this year, or is it just a general comment about finance and procurement? Don't know if Matt can answer that one. Or Tom, I don't mind either. Thank you.
We've in the council's budget report, we've signalled some of our reshaping savings going forward, and certainly we'll be looking to have some procurement savings across the long term. It's true to say we've had a number of discussions here about procurement, and every time I look at it, I seem to have a bigger agenda to pick up. But we've done a lot of work on the contract register, getting a forward plan in place. That's there, although it will continually need more work and tidying up. But certainly we've got the foundations where we can start pushing for some savings out of procurement now.
That's good news. That's good news too. Okay, do we have any other questions for anyone on that? Okay. Well, thank you, committee, for some really good comments here, and we've got a couple of recommendations too. But before we move on, because part of our role today is to consider the comments and recommendations that have come from our fellow members on their own scrutiny committees. And I think, Tom, you were going to just do a quick overview for committee, weren't you? E&R, I know we had their comments, but it was later today by email, so I'm not sure if everybody has seen them. So, Tom, if you just want to do a quick summary for everyone, so we're on the same page. Thank you.
Of course, no problem at all. So yes, thank you, Chair. So the Director of Plans have been to the other 4 committees, the most relevant committee to the remits of their directorates. Learning and Culture considered the Learning and Skills Plan. They made some comments in relation to active travel, also whether there was sufficient resource in the area of additional learning needs. There was a theme in terms of wanting to be more ambitious with the Council's youth service and making sure that we actively heard the voices on views of young people, and that similarly to Councillor Goodjohn, some work to tackle child poverty. There were comments relating to better access to exams for those people being home educated, and also making sure that there was sufficient focus on the long-term impact of changes to the benefits system. The Homes and Safe Communities endorsed the plan that was presented to them around environment and around from environment and housing. It's a very long, late day. And they requested that a reference to the closure of community centres be removed. That was the only comment passed on. Healthy Living and Social Care Committee noted the Social Services Directorate plan with no further comments or views. And as you say, Chair, Environment and Regeneration Committee met last night to consider, again, the Environment and Housing Plan, but also the Place Directorate plan. They have referred some comments to yourselves that it would be helpful for percentages that are referred to in reports to also be quantified or translated into the absolute value wherever possible. As Councillor Franks mentioned earlier, that there was support for the use of volunteers being welcomed, but that we should do more to consider encouraging, supporting and incentivising local residents. And just finally, that the committee noted the challenges around resourcing and the potential impact that they could have on both of the directorate plans, and requested to keep members updated in relation to any delays regarding the savings programme, which of course we will be doing as part of the revenue monitoring. So just bringing those references to yourself as the Oversight Committee Chair.
Thank you, Tom. I don't know how everybody else feels, but my feeling on this is that our fellow members have debated and discussed and have presented comments and recommendations that I feel, unless anybody has and takes offence to anything that's been recommended, we should just endorse as a committee. I think it's quite important that all of our voices are heard, and that Cabinet gets the full update from everybody. On top of that, we've got all of our comments, and I've also listed a number of recommendations that have come from our debate tonight, which I'd also like us to consider putting forward as a committee. We had the recommendation from Councillor Carroll that was on CP41 that we have that strengthening of the specific connection with our committee on that one. Councillor Goodjohn, I know you also wanted to make sure that we had the measurements for child poverty in there, and also that we look at a milestone for the third sector engagement, because that's also an important area. Councillor Johnson, you wanted to see a specific link in our directorate plan to the other plans that they're referring to, so that you can easily see what you're looking for, which makes perfect sense. And I think, Helen, you said that is something that we can do anyway. And I would like us to also consider, if committee supports this, that within that, the food strategy part, that we have a look at some targets for us as a county, and that's to do with supporting the increase of growers and producers, and also the percentage of locally grown and produced food that our children eat in their school dinners. I think that's quite an important thing that sits alongside the food resilience piece of work. So I don't know how everybody feels about all of our comments, all of the comments and recommendations going from our fellow scrutiny committees and those recommendations going forward. If I've missed anything, or if anybody wants, is there something else that I need to add, please speak now. Now's your opportunity. No? Okay, that's marvellous. Can we have a hand to move then, if that's okay? Thank you, Councillor Goodjohn, and thank you, Councillor Wood. That's great. Okay, then. Thanks everyone for that debate. I think that was really really healthy and a decent debate on that matter. This is the only agenda item for today, so I can say that the next item, which is part 2. Yes, basically there are no urgent items. There's no part 2 urgent items either. So it just then falls for me to just say that this meeting is the last of this particular session for this year. So I want to thank all members of this committee. I want to thank the Vice Chair, Councillor Goodjohn, and you Democratic members, Karen, and all officers, because it's been a really good year. See where we are next year, and come May. Lots of exciting things happening. I think the next meeting is going to be, is it the 22nd? I think, is it the 22nd of May?
21st of May, Chair.
21st of May, there we are.
The next meeting in the calendar, albeit if things go through to full council, there will be changes.
Full council has to decide first if we're changing the scrutiny meetings, number of committees, everything else. Yeah, okay.
Yes. Okay, thank you.
Marvellous. So thank you, everybody. Do have a good night, and I'm sure we'll meet again anyway. Thank you. Bye-bye.